Alright, so today we'll be looking at reproduction in plants, set 1 topical practice paper. So I will be going through your open-ended questions first, and then we will move on to the MCQs. So the first one, CD carry out an experiment on a seed to grow into a seedling as shown below. So this is an experimental question. So with every experimental question, okay, alright, we have certain data. So let's take a look at it. So in the graph below, two curves shows the changes in mass of the seed leaf and the shoot of the seedling during the experiment. Which curve, X or Y, shows how the mass of a seed leaf changes during the experiment? Give a reason for your answer. So in this case, there are a few keywords here. So obviously we see the word seed leaf. So we should recall that this question is actually testing you on your concept of whether or not you know the function of the seed leaf. So the function of the seed leaf is to provide food for the seedling or the seed until the true leaves has been formed. Now, given that you already know that, so think about it. Mass is talking about the amount of substance that makes up or something. So because the idea of your seed leaf is to provide food, so as the days go by and your seedling starts to grow, it needs to use up the food that is actually stored in your seed leaf. So logically, if that's the case, your seed leaf should decrease with time as your seedling increases in growth. So when we take a look at it, your answer would probably be X, whereby as the days go by, the mass of the seed leaf will start to decrease. Alright? Now be very careful. Some of the students, instead of saying mass of seed leaf, they will tell me weight of seed leaf. Technically, you are not wrong. However, in this question, they already told you it's mass. Mass is defined as the amount of substance in a particular object, okay? Or, amount of matter in a particular substance. So it's basically the amount of substance there is. Whereas weight has got to do with gravity. Is the amount of force acting on an object that is actually weight. And weight changes, right? So on Earth, maybe you weigh about 40 kg. When you go onto the moon, okay, your weight changes, but your mass does not change. This is something we need to be very careful of. Mass and weight, they are related, but they are different things. So the more mass you have, the more you weigh, simply because you are made up of more substance, right? Think about it, okay? But just because you change location, your mass does not change, but your weight changes because the gravity pull is different, just like Earth and the Moon. I'm teaching forward here because this is something that you will need to know very clearly in primary 6. So your answer would be X. Now, you will also need to tell me what should you observe. So there is a decrease in the mass of the seed leaves as the seedling is using up the stored food in the seed leaves. So what am I looking for? I'm looking for a few things. Number one, the correct curve. If that is wrong, straight away it's all wrong. I'm looking for a description of what you should observe from the graph, which is a decrease in mass, right? And then I'm also looking out for the reason why you would see this observation. Next, what would happen to the seed if there were no sunlight throughout the first 8 days? Give a reason for your answer. So this is a seed. Ask yourself, okay? Now, they only mention that there is no sunlight. Alright? They never say that every other thing is missing. So, if the answer would be the seed will germinate. However, you need to understand that will germinate alone is not good enough. You have to actually tell me what are the factors needed for germination, which is your wow, W-O-W. And then you have to tell me that because they said no sunlight, you have to explicitly tell me that sunlight is not required for germination. So how would my answer look like? Okay, you would say that the seed will still germinate, right? Because they ask you what will happen. Please don't tell me nothing. Some of you actually told me nothing. As only water, oxygen, and warmth is needed for germination. Sunlight is not, but not light. So remember to add in the factors required for germination explicitly. Many of you did not do that. Some of you also left out the part that germination does not require light. This is definitely a must because it then satisfies the demands of the question, because the condition was that there was no light. Next, how would the seedling get its food from day 8 onwards? So at day 8, you will note that since X is your seed leaf, right? It means that your seed leaf at day 8 would have been completely depleted. So the whole idea is to show you that since your seed leaf is completely depleted, there must be an alternative way of getting food. And the answer would be from the true leaves, because at day 8, the true leaves should have appeared. So I always teach you all the term true leaf because there are seed leaf and true leaf. So true leaf is the proper leaf. Now, the problem with this is many students will just go, oh, they will obtain, okay, food from the leaf. My question to you is, how? Right? So ask yourself, what is the function of the leaf? The leaf is to carry out photosynthesis. How? Why is it that the leaf is able to carry out photosynthesis but not other parts of the plant? And the deciding factor would be the plant has chlorophyll to trap sunlight. This is something that only your leaves can do. So you have to weave that function into your answer. So by just saying that it gets food from the leaves is not good enough because the question asked you how. So once again ask yourself, so how do leaves photosynthesize? It trap light. Okay? So you will need to answer it as the seedling will have true leaves to trap sunlight and photosynthesize. If you write make food, it is absolutely correct. Okay? But having said that, when you go to secondary school, make food is rejected. So therefore, I prefer to tell students just start off on the right foot, learn how to read spell photosynthesis. Okay? Next. Now, the diagram below shows a piece of land with a river flowing through it. Okay? X and Y are fruit-producing plants. The fruit of X are dispersed by water, and the fruits of Y are dispersed by wind. Mark 4 X's and 4 Y's on the diagram above to show where the fruits X and Y are likely to be dispersed after dropping from their parent plants X and Y. Okay, now, so this is what happens. When you do this kind of question, obviously the question is on fruit or seed dispersal. So if it's actually reliant on an agent, such as wind and water, it is actually directional based. This is something different. I'm going to pen it down. Water plus wind, these two equals directional based, meaning that or dependent. So it depends on the agent. So for example, the direction of the wind is this way. Direction of water is this way. Okay? Now, the location of your parent plant for wind is actually over here. So when you think about that, the wind is blowing in this direction. There shouldn't be any young plants before this dotted line. Okay? Before this red line. Simply because the wind is in this direction. Right? So how can there be a Y here? It cannot be. It needs to be after the red line. And the dispersal of it should be random. I have some students lining up the Y so nicely in one straight row like this, you know. Are you sure? I don't think so. Possible, but not probable. Okay? There is a difference. Possible means it can happen, but what are the chances of it lining up so nicely? What's the probability of it? Low. So possible, but not probable. So I'm teaching you how to be smart here. You answer in the most possible and probable manner, which is random. Okay? Next. The same thing over here. This is actually, okay, directional dependent. So if your parent plant is here, then your plants can only end up somewhere downstream. It needs to be after this point as well, unless your floating seed is able to swim upstream. Other than that, it needs to go downstream. So I will accept it, okay, if it is somewhere here. It needs to be near the water at the bank. So some of you have drawn it over the other side, it's fine. Possible. That's possible and probably probable, okay? Because sometimes, you know, maybe for some reason there is a switch in water currents, okay? But this is something that is most probable. So if you draw your X somewhere here, this is wrong, okay? Not saying wrong lah, but not really that probable. So I would draw it nearer towards the riverbank, just to be sure that the examiner does not mistaken this as an on-land plant, right? This is more like a dispersal by river. Next, the question specifically tells you to draw 4 X's and 4 Y. But for whatever reason, some students only drew 3 because they think that this over here is included as 1. No. It says 4. So you draw 4. Okay, as simple as that. And usually the bigger ones, right, are the parent plants. Okay, I'm going to label that for you. Next. John found 2 fruits and a seed as shown below. Okay. He decided to group them according to how they disperse. The fruit and seeds are not drawn to scale. Help John classify the seed A and the fruits B and C in the boxes provided above according to how they disperse. So by animals, there are 2 ways. Okay. One way is actually by attracting them with fleshy fruit, sweet tasting fleshy fruit. Another way, if you have structures that are spiky or hook-like. So what happens is that when the animal walks past, it will cling onto the animal's fur, and then when the animal walks away and brushes against other bushes or whatever, it will be rubbed off. Okay? So C is an animal. B, because it's a pod, I told you already, this is a pod-like structure, and it shows that the seeds are shooting away. This is sitting forcefully. And then after that, A is by wind. Why? You have your wing-like structures here. So this will help you identify that. Next. Okay. Study the fruit carefully. State the parts shown above or part that enables the fruit to be dispersed by water. So in this case, the answer is just fibrous husk. That's it. Because your fibrous husk is the one that has air spaces. Describe how the part you mentioned in A helps to keep the fruit, okay, afloat. So basically, over here, you need to tell me that the fibrous husk basically traps air or has air pockets that traps air. I have told you explicitly that this is a common mistake that students tend to make. I want everyone to now look at their answers and see if you have made this very common mistake. Okay, I believe that now you realize that, yes, it's true. You've left it out and you've lost the mark. So basically, you need to say that the fibrous husk traps air, thus allowing the fruit to float. Please answer in complete sentence. Some of you just say trap air. So, trap air for it to fly. Yeah. So, float in the water, right? Next. Plant P and insect Q depend on each other as shown. Okay, in the diagram below. When you have a plant and have an insect, okay, straight away you know that this is probably pollination that this question is going to ask you. The sad thing is, some of you tell me otherwise. Now, how does plant P and insect Q benefit from this relationship? What is the benefit for plant P? So basically for this, because the question is how, you need to explicitly tell me the process. Pollination alone is not enough. Okay? You have to tell me that what happens is that insect Q will help P by transferring the pollen grains from the anther to the stigma so that fertilization can occur. Okay? Alright? So there are actually two processes here. The first one is talking about what insect Q does. So it transfers pollen grains from the anther to the stigma. And then the second part of the question requires you to tell me how does this help them. It's so that fertilization can occur. Okay? And then what's the benefit for insect Q? Now, the benefit for insect Q is that it is able to obtain. Okay, so insect Q is able to get nectar, which is a source of food from the flower. So if you just say that it is nectar, you will still get the marks, but I don't think it's very complete. You should also explain why is nectar beneficial to insect Q. It's because it is a food for them, right? So some of you have gone to say, oh, to make honey. Okay, that's great. But some of you told me, oh, insect Q can get honey from the plant. That's not correct. You can get nectar to make honey, but you don't get honey from the plant. Alright, so that is something you need to be careful of because that's factually inaccurate. In exam, alright, you will get a deduction of half mark for saying something that is not correct. Okay? Next. The fruit of plant A is juicy and contains seeds that are hard and stone-like. Describe how the seeds of plant A can be dispersed by animals over a wide area. Now, you need to be very careful. When looking at questions like this, you need to ask yourself, the tips that are given, so I know that it's juicy. Juicy means it attracts animals to eat it. Okay, animals to eat it, that's no issue. Okay. However, at the same time, we also need to see that we do not over anticipate what the question wants us to answer. Some of you would say, oh, to swallow the small seeds. But the case is, the question did not tell you that the seeds were small. Okay, you assumed that's not the case. But what the question did tell you that it was hard and stone-like, so it is indigestible. Okay, so because it was indigestible, alright, the animal probably would not eat it. Okay, and would have thrown it away. Now, by throwing it away, we also need to realize one other thing. The animal may not necessarily throw it far away from the parents, right? If the animal is eating the whole fruit and swallowing the seeds, the small seeds, because it stays there, small seeds, then we can assume that yes, probably it's far away from the parent plant because you would not be standing there forever due to predators. Okay, basically if you're fruit eating, that means you're probably a herbivore and there are carnivores going to eat you. So you don't want to be standing there. But if let's just say, okay, they tell you that it is not digestible, they didn't say it's small, you probably eat already then throw. So it can be near the plant or it can be far away from the plant. So the term that we use to say this is random location. So whether or not it's far away from the plant depends on luck in reality. But most probably it definitely will be further away from the parent plant. Okay? So that's one thing I want you all to take note of. So firstly, juicy means that the animals will eat the flesh of it. So many of the students actually say eat the whole fruit. No, you eat the flesh. You're missing the keyword flesh, and then you throw the seed away. Okay? And then you also must mention that the seed is not digestible. Okay? So how do we then translate that into written form? Right? The seeds which are hard and stone-like, so you must use back whatever they tell you, cannot be digested. So they will be discarded or thrown away after the juicy flesh is eaten. And the seeds dispersed when animals move around to random location. Okay. So it's a bit of a luck. Whether it gets further away. Okay, next. The fruit or plant bee has a hard shell and its seeds are a source of food for some animals. Okay? So squirrel X breaks the hard shell and buries each seed separately in a different place. The squirrel also buries more seeds than it would eat later on. State one benefit for the squirrel to bury each seed in a different place. You need to be careful. Quite a number of you wrote the benefit for the plant and not the squirrel. Okay? Look carefully. Is the question asking you for a benefit of the plant or for the squirrel? So a lot of you say, oh, to avoid overcrowding, etc., etc. How would that benefit the squirrel? I don't get it. Okay? No. So this is actually an adaptation question, very similar to primary 6 questions, all right, whereby you need to learn how to make use of knowledge that you've gained prior, all right, in application base. So the whole idea is that, okay, if another animal comes, all right, they would only find the seeds buried in for location A. The squirrel will still have B, C, D, all right, as a backup plan. They will still have food. And no, these people are not predators because your seeds are basically not animals. You know, your road predators come. Quite a number of you. Okay, so how do we pen this down? So you would say that the squirrel will have an available supply of food to survive as other animals may not find or the food. Okay? And don't tell me something like the other animals cannot find the seed. Why? Because the seed is food. I must see food for the squirrel. State 2 benefits for the plant. Now we are talking about the plant, not about the squirrel. Okay? So the first thing you want to talk about is overcrowding. So when you talk about overcrowding, what comes together with overcrowding is always, when you prevent overcrowding, you prevent the reduction of competition for the 4 things. And you have to write it down explicitly. Alright? So the first thing would be to prevent overcrowding and reduce the competition for light, minerals, space, and water. So this needs to be explicitly there whenever you write about overcrowding. I stress again, whenever you give an answer for overcrowding, the next part always follow. Please always follow with what does it do when you prevent overcrowding. Prevention of overcrowding reduces competition for light, minerals, space, and water. These 4 items needs to be there. Benefit number 2 is that when it gets spread out to a wider area, okay, it increases survival rates. Alright, so this is another adaptation question. Okay, I cannot teach you everything. So this is something that you need to reason it out. It's got nothing to do with competition. Some of you will go, oh, but Mr. Chong, isn't then when you don't fight for sunlight, space, and water, isn't that sort of increasing its survival rates already? Actually, when I say increase rates of survival, I mean there are other threats to it. For example, maybe the area that the seed is not suitable for germination. Maybe the area that the seed happen to be in happen to have many other animals that like to eat seeds. Then the seeds will be eaten up. But instead of putting it in that one area, you spread it around. There will be a chance whereby this particular seed will go into an environment that is suitable for germination, and there are no animals that likes to eat the seeds. That is the meaning of it. Okay, just in case you're wondering what is the difference. Okay, so the seeds are dispersed over a wider area to ensure survival of its kind. Okay? Now, next, justify true or false. So all plants reproduce from seeds. This is obviously false. There are some non-flowering plants example ferns that reproduce from spores. Okay, next statement. The male parts of a flower are anther, filament, and petal. That is also false. Petal is not a male part. Just in case you didn't know, your petals are actually they are modified leaves. So they are actually leaves, but they do not have chlorophyll in them. They are modified. Okay, the rest of it all are true. Okay, so the petal attracts pollinators such as insect and bees, and the method of dispersal are as follow. Okay.